Hi, it's Stan Phelps. On a Friday, I wanted to bring a little levity, a little fun to everyone that's watching this. I'm going to share a trick, a riddle, a joke, and a story from one of my favorite books. It's called Bar Tricks, Bad Jokes, and Even Worse Stories. A little bit of background on it. Back 22 years ago, I moved from Portland, Oregon to New York City back in 1998. And while in New York City, I caught up with a good buddy of mine, David Ackerman, who was managing a bar and restaurant in Manhattan. Dave, about 7 years earlier, was a flatmate of mine when I lived in London right after I graduated from college. And he was a great friend, and while living in New York City, over beers one night, we hatched this idea. And the idea was he was off on Mondays or Tuesdays, which tend to be slower nights. We would go out and we would scan the entire city, and we would look for tricks and jokes and stories and riddles. And just had a lot of fun doing it. And over the course of about 2 years, we collected over 100 tricks and riddles and jokes and stories. And just a few years ago, it ended up seeing the light of day. We published the book. And so it was just a fun exercise. I love bar tricks and bad jokes. Anyhow, the book is divided by chapters by the types of different tricks. That's how it's organized, mainly by the tricks. And so over the last few weeks, I've shared whether it's a coin trick or a dollar trick or a glass trick. Today, I want to share a word/number trick. And for this, I need you to go along with me to do this. I want you to think of any number between 2 and 10. Obviously, you can't tell me, but keep that in your head. Then I want you to take that number, and I want you to multiply that number by 9. Take that number and multiply it by 9. That should give you a 2-digit number. What I want you to do is separate those digits apart and then add them together. Okay, so if it was, let's say it was 63, you would add the 6 and 3 together to get 9. Anyhow, you should now have a single number. Now what I want you to do is take that single number and minus 5 from it. Take that number, minus 5 from it. That should leave you with still having a number. Now if A is 1 and B is 2 and C is 3 and so on and so forth, you should have a letter that's associated with your number. You've got that letter? I want you to think of a country that starts with that letter. Now I want you to take the second letter in that country, and I want you to think of an animal that starts with that letter. You got it? Now I want you to think of a common color of that animal that you thought of. You got it? So you've got the country, the animal, and the common color. I'm sorry to tell you, but there are no gray elephants in Denmark. Okay, so that's the trick. I'll explain the trick in the comments. Here's the riddle. I'll give anyone who's listening right now $20 if you can tell me the presidents on the 1, the 5, and the 10. $20 if you can tell me the presidents on the 1, the 5, and the 10. Now, it's kind of a little bit of a trick riddle because you can't tell me the presidents on the 1, the 5, and the 10. The 1, George Washington. The 5, Abraham Lincoln. And the reason why it's a trick riddle is that Alexander Hamilton, who's on the $10 bill, was never a president of the United States. He was simply the Secretary of the Treasury. Thank you, Lin-Manuel Miranda, for giving everyone a tutorial on Alexander. All right, so that's the riddle. On to the joke. And the joke is this. A three-legged dog walks into a saloon. Three-legged dog walks into a saloon. He looks at everyone in the saloon and says, very loudly, he says, "I'm looking for the man who shot my paw." All right, it wasn't a funny joke. It was clean, though. Give me credit for that. All right, lastly, let's talk about the story. Look at Kermit here. He's hit the airplane bottles a little bit too hard. He's out of it. So the story is about, where does the saying, "three sheets to the wind," come from? When somebody gets really plastered, blind drunk, 3 sheets to the wind, where does that come from? Well, it turns out that most sailing ships have 3 sails. And if you were a watchman at night, especially, your main job was making sure that the sails didn't get tangled in the wind. Now, if you were on the watch and you weren't paying attention, maybe you fell asleep, or if you drank too much, you passed out, you might miss the fact that all 3 of the sails get tangled in the wind, and that became a huge problem. And so you'd be described as being 3 sheets to the wind. Now, I mentioned free, today's the day 29 of 29 free ebooks. Grab your copy of Bar Tricks, Bad Jokes, and Even Worse Stories on Amazon. I want to leave you with one last trick. It's one of my favorite ones. It didn't make the book for liability reasons, and you're going to see in a second. This trick is called the Statue of Liberty. You need a martini glass, some Sambuca straight up, and it's an ode to my folks in New York City. Let me show you how it's done. This is just a quick 9-second video. All right, that's the Statue of Liberty. Again, don't forget to download Bar Tricks, Bad Jokes, and Even Worse Stories. It's free today, Friday, April 24th. And have a safe and sane weekend.